Another big night in Alberta, albeit a slow one, as the United Conservative Party wins a majority government. Plus, Aaron O'Toole makes an announcement in the House about what CSIS told him regarding China's interference. Federal political correspondent and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley is here to weigh in on it all. Brian, welcome back to Bridge City News. Great to have you on.
Thanks for having me. And what a night in Alberta politics on Monday.
Absolutely. I know I was here pretty late last night. Okay, so it was a big night in Alberta. The UCP winning a majority government with 49 seats. The numbers are still unofficial at this time, but Premier-elect Danielle Smith made her victory speech. So, Brian, what do you think the relationship will be like between the newly re-elected Smith government in Edmonton and the Trudeau government in Ottawa?
It's going to be rocky, but if the two leaders are smart, won't be unworkable. And what I mean by that is, we heard Danielle Smith in her victory speech take a shot at Justin Trudeau right off the top. We're going to stand here against Ottawa interfering in Alberta's livelihood. And, okay, so that's expected. And we can expect that Justin Trudeau is going to take shots. And you'll hear Liberals out of Ottawa sniping about how she's got a reduced mandate. I mean, ignoring the fact that Justin Trudeau is running a minority government after losing seats in the last two elections and having the smallest plurality of votes. Or he doesn't even have the plurality of votes. He lost the popular vote, and he's got the smallest percentage of the popular vote to form government in Canadian history. They're still going to snipe that, Smith has a reduced mandate, which is true, but she's still doing better than Justin Trudeau. But on the working together side, there are certain things that we've already seen that they will work together on. The $10 a day childcare program. That's something that parents want, or a good number of parents want, and the program's there. Danielle Smith is going to continue to work on that to try and make lives better for working moms and dads in Alberta. We saw before the election was called that she was willing and ready to jump on the new healthcare deal and say, yeah, I'll be a part of that. Why would she do that? Because who wants to go into an election saying, oh, no, I'm against taking federal money? Sure, it wasn't enough federal money and she's going to want more, but you don't go into a provincial election where healthcare is going to be an issue saying, yeah, they offered me billions and I said no. So you'll see them working together on issues like that while still taking pot shots at each other. I don't expect it to be a constant endless stream of fighting, but I do expect it to be bumpy.
Mm-hmm. So we're assuming that Trudeau then would have preferred a Notley government?
Oh, he was so in tune with Rachel Notley when she was premier and he was prime minister. He absolutely would have preferred a Notley government. He'd prefer to have Liberals and New Democrats straight across the country. When his father, Pierre Trudeau, won or was running for the Liberal leadership in '68, there was a famous line by a Liberal cabinet minister caught on camera saying, don't let the insert bad name here win. He's a socialist. And, you can say the same thing about Justin Trudeau. He's more of a New Democrat than a Liberal. So, yeah, he would have preferred Rachel Notley. They align more. Although it was interesting to hear Notley take Jagmeet Singh to task during the election campaign, trying to show some distance between her party and the federal party on issues around climate change and carbon taxes and how they would deal with the oil industry. So, even she would be a bit closer to Justin Trudeau than she would be on Jagmeet Singh on that. So, yeah, Trudeau, he's going to deal with this and he'll try and score some points in fighting with Danielle Smith, but absolutely would have preferred a Rachel Notley victory, which, when you look at how close some Calgary ridings were, apparently only a few thousand votes are the real difference between flipping a good number of seats in Calgary. So the election wasn't tight in Edmonton or outside of Calgary, but it definitely was in Calgary.
Yeah, for sure. And we kind of expected that as well. And of course, Brian, at the top of the interview, we alluded to how long the night was. And it seemed that the vote count took forever. How are things in Ontario? Quite a bit different, aren't they?
They are. So there's two different things, from my understanding, two big changes that Elections Alberta brought in. One, instead of reporting poll by poll, and there might be in certain ridings 100 or 150 polling stations. You know, the place, the desk that you go to cast your ballot, that is a polling place. And the next desk over is another polling place. And normally they report their votes individually. And that's the way that Alberta's traditionally done it. And, you know, the polling places are grouped by geographic region, your street, your neighborhood. They grouped them together last night and reported in a different way. And so, you know, maybe this polling desk was, you know, ready and counted right away. Well, they got to wait for 10 others before they can report. So that delayed things. And also, they didn't seem to have these electronic tabulators working for the advance vote. Now, in Ontario, for our provincial elections, we use a paper ballot, but it's counted automatically by a machine. And you watch it go into the machine, and then it goes through the counting machine, it's scanned, and goes into a cardboard ballot box, traditional ballot box, that gets sealed. So it's counted electronically, but there's a backup paper ballot there. You know, I think that is the way to go. We've been using that for decades here for municipal and provincial elections. It works very well. Broadcasters hate it because you know the results 10 minutes after the polls close, and so you've got a whole broadcast night with nothing left to talk
Yeah, it
about.
takes away that excitement for sure.
But you don't have the late nights like you had last night, and people go to bed knowing the results. And you know, I know some people are worried about electronic voting, but this has the paper ballot backup. If there's a problem or an irregularity, or you say, well, wait a minute, why did that, you know, riding or that neighborhood suddenly flip? It never votes that way. You can go in and you can count the ballots by hand from the original paper. So, you know, it's a good compromise and good backup system that maybe Elections Alberta wants to look, and they can come to Toronto. I'll show them around.
Okay, sounds good, Brian. Yes, that was very, very frustrating. There we go. Okay, so let's switch gears here. Brian, Aaron O'Toole recently was informed that he was being targeted by the Chinese government. But Tuesday morning, he stood and spoke in the House of Commons to talk about what CSIS told him regarding China's interference. So, Brian, what did he say?
He didn't go deep into detail, and he cited his history of being a commissioned officer under Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth when he was in the Army, when he was in the Air Force, as being why he didn't want to give up the full details. But he did say he's going to exercise his parliamentary privilege. He could have stood up in the House of Commons and said everything in full detail of what CSIS told him, but he didn't. Instead, he painted a picture in broad strokes, where he described how he was targeted, the methods, some of the methods that China used, the timing of it, the fact that the government knew about it before the 2021 election and didn't do anything about it. So the party was targeted. O'Toole himself was targeted. There was an organized campaign by the United Front's work department to go out and spread misinformation about him, he said. United Front's Works Department is an arm of Beijing that is set up in countries around the world to do Beijing's bidding. And he told the House of Commons that CSIS informed him that, yes, there was a misinformation campaign, that there were specific conservative MPs targeted for defeat by China, that they have the information on this. They informed him that, yes, the government had been made aware, and the government didn't do anything. He pointed to the fact that this was happening at the same time as the House of Commons was trying to get documents on what happened in the Winnipeg lab, and the government went to court to block that from happening after Parliament voted to say you've got to hand over documents. He said, so all of this is going on, and the government's being silent about China targeting the opposition, keeping it to themselves. That's untenable. That is absolutely untenable, and it's unforgivable. And you can't say at this point that this is just media leaks. This is an elected member of parliament, a former cabinet minister, and a former leader of the opposition explaining to the House of Commons in the easiest way he can without violating secrets what happened to him and why it's wrong. This just shows that we need more action on this, not to sweep it under the rug.
Right, and there was also a mention of a campaign of voter suppression by China. So, Brian, what was that all about?
That was trying to make sure that people didn't come out and vote conservative. And we've heard, descriptions of things like this before. Kenny Chu, the former conservative MP from Vancouver area, has talked about this, where he'd knock on somebody's door and he described one constituent saying to him, Can we talk in the backyard? Please leave your cell phone at the front door so that they can't hear us. And then they'd go into the backyard because the man didn't believe there were any bugs in the backyard. And he had to explain that China was intimidating people, not to vote for somebody else, but at times telling them, don't vote for the conservative. And that was in Kenny Chu's riding. Of course, he's one of the MPs who lost in the 2021 election. He had put forward the idea of a foreign agents registry. So that's the voter suppression. And then he was also a victim of the misinformation campaign, saying that the foreign agents registry, which says if you're lobbying on behalf of a foreign government, you have to register. Well, that was portrayed as if you're Chinese, you're going to have to register, and then they'll use that to throw you out of the country. That was not accurate at all. But those were the sorts of things that were going on in the last election. The government knew about it. They were informed. They did nothing.
Okay, and now, Brian, it looks like we have the federal NDP putting forward a motion calling once again for a public inquiry into China's interference. And they're also calling for David Johnston to step aside. So do you think that this motion will pass? And if it does, what will happen then?
Well, if it does pass, I don't see how David Johnston stays on. How do you stay on as the Prime Minister's special rapporteur when the majority of MPs say your services are not welcome and we don't trust you, or we believe there's an apprehension of bias? You know, Jagmeet Singh isn't saying that David Johnston is biased. He's just saying the situation on the ground, his connections with Trudeau, the fact that he hired a lawyer as his general counsel to aid in writing the report and gathering the information and conducting all of this work, that she's a longtime Liberal donor. You know, all of these things add up to making people question the validity of the report, the validity of Johnston's work, and it makes it untenable. Well, if Johnston doesn't resign before the vote happens or within 5 minutes of it happening, that's another black mark on him. He never should have accepted this. So, you know, I expect that Johnston will resign. I will be shocked and appalled if he does not. Now, what does the government do if this motion passes? Well, they ignored the last call by Parliament back in March, 172 to 149, calling for a public inquiry. That didn't, result in any action by the government. They might ignore it again. There's also talk of prorogation happening, of the Trudeau Liberals trying to shut things down. My view is that Jagmeet Singh needs to say to the Prime Minister, you know what? If you don't call a public inquiry, the coalition's off. That doesn't mean that we go to an election. It just means that the government doesn't have an automatic dance partner. They don't have another party that's going to rubber stamp everything they want to do. They'll have to go on a case-by-case basis, and they could lose. That would show some strength by Mr. Singh. That would put the government on notice, and it would restore power to MPs, which is where it should be.
Brian, the opioid crisis is something that has hit cities and towns across Canada. It's hit it pretty hard, too. Now, on Monday, the House voted down a motion from the Conservatives calling on the government to change course on drug policy. So what were they asking for exactly?
They were asking the government to back away from the latest expansion of what's known as harm reduction. We've been debating for years things like safe injection sites. Well, those are now spread across the country, and the overdose crisis has gotten worse, not better. Now there's a move to something called safe supply. So to try and get you off fentanyl, there's different drugs that the government will prescribe you and give you. This is leading to all kinds of problems, whether it's in Vancouver, whether it's in London, Ontario, where studies have been done. And I'm sure it's happening in Lethbridge if you are unfortunate to have safer supply moving there. People are taking these drugs, which aren't as potent, and they're either crushing up the pills and injecting them, which causes all kinds of physical problems, overdoses, other medical issues, or they're selling them on the streets, sometimes to kids as young as 12 and 14, to buy fentanyl. So this is a problem that's been documented. The alarm's been raised by doctors who had been supportive of these programs. And the Trudeau government says, no, we believe in the science. I mean, that's the term they use all the time, the science. Where have we heard that before? And they're refusing to back down on this. They claim the Poilievre Conservatives just want to go back to the 1980s war on drugs. What they called for was end spending money on buying drugs for addicts and put that money into paying for treatment, recovery treatment for addicts. What we've done in Canada is we've expanded the drug supply, made it easier to get. We're decriminalizing in different parts of the country. and we're not offering extra treatment. So we're making it easier to get drugs. We are expanding the supply to people who should have less supply. And on treatment, we're saying, oh, yeah, sorry, we can't really afford that. This is the wrong way to go on Canada's drug policy, but it's the one that the Liberals and the other progressive parties believe in and say that this is the compassionate thing to do. I think it's the opposite of compassion.
It's such a big issue all across the country, for sure. Brian, looks like we're out of time here, but thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Brian Lilley is a Toronto Sun columnist and our federal political correspondent. He joined us today from Toronto. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.